I'm 34 and I work from home doing IT support for a logistics company. It's mostly remote troubleshooting, walking people through basic issues, resetting things, explaining the same steps over and over. It's not difficult, just repetitive enough that by the end of the week, I need a reason to leave the house for a few hours. On weekends, I usually drive through nearby neighborhoods and stop at yard sales, not for anything specific. I just like looking. Most of the time, I don't even buy anything. If I do, it's usually old electronics, stuff people don't want anymore but never threw away. Radios, speakers, outdated equipment, things that still have some weight to them. I've always preferred that over newer devices. They feel more solid, easier to understand. A few weeks ago, I saw a handwritten sign at an intersection about 5 minutes from my place. Just yard sale, with an arrow pointing into a neighborhood I don't usually drive through. I followed it mostly out of habit. The house was at the end of a short street. Not many people around, no other cars pulled over, which was a little unusual for a Saturday morning, but not enough to stand out at the time. They had a folding table set up near the garage, some kitchen stuff, a couple of lamps, a stack of DVDs. Off to the side on the driveway, there was an old CRT TV with a built-in VCR, the kind that's all one unit, heavy gray plastic casing. I walked over and crouched down to look at it. It wasn't in bad shape, a little dusty, but no cracks in the screen. I pressed the power button out of habit. Nothing happened, which didn't surprise me since it wasn't plugged in. "You into those things?" a voice said behind me. I turned and saw the guy running the sale. Probably late 50s, maybe early 60s. Thin, wearing a baseball cap and a jacket that looked too heavy for the weather. "Yeah," I said, "I like older electronics." He nodded slowly, like he was thinking something over. "That one still works," he said. "Haven't used it in a while, though." "How much?" 20. That was low enough that I didn't bother negotiating. "Yeah, I'll take it." He didn't react right away, just stood there for a second, looking at the TV, not at me. Then he nodded once. "All right." When I went to lift it, he stepped in. "Careful with it," he said. "It's heavier than it looks." "I've got it," I told him. He didn't move. "Where you parked?" he asked. I pointed down the street. "Right there." "I'll help you carry it," he said. I didn't really need help, but I didn't argue. We both lifted it and walked it over to my car. He let me open the trunk, then watched while I set it inside. Before I closed it, he said, "You local?" "Yeah," I said. "Not far." "What street?" It wasn't an aggressive question, just casual. I didn't think much of it. I told him the street name. He nodded again, like he recognized it. "All right," he said. "Just, if anything seems off with it, don't mess with it too much." That part didn't really make sense. "What do you mean?" I asked. He shrugged. "Old stuff like that, sometimes it's better to leave it as is." I figured he just meant not to take it apart. "Got it," I said. I handed him the cash, got back in my car, and left. The TV sat in my living room for a couple of days before I actually did anything with it. I had work, and honestly, I forgot about it. On Tuesday night, I finally decided to set it up. I cleared a space on a small stand near the wall outlet and plugged it in. It powered on right away, that soft static hum, the screen lighting up gray before settling into that faint flicker older TVs have. I pressed the eject button on the VCR just to check the mechanism. Nothing happened. I pressed it again. Still nothing. I leaned closer and noticed something. The slot wasn't empty. There was a tape inside. That caught my attention. I tried ejecting it a few more times, but it didn't budge. The motor made a weak clicking sound, like it was trying but couldn't. I almost left it alone, but I figured if the tape was stuck, it might damage the player if I forced it later. So I unplugged the TV, flipped it slightly to the side, and removed the outer screws from the back panel. I didn't take the whole thing apart, just enough to access the VCR mechanism. It took about 15 minutes, but I managed to manually release the tape. It slid out slowly. It was completely black. No label, no writing, just a faint sticky residue where something used to be. I turned it over in my hands for a second, then reassembled the back of the TV. Once everything was back together, I plugged it in again and inserted the tape properly. The screen flickered, then static. A few seconds later, the image came through. It looked like a normal home recording. Grainy, slightly washed out colors, the kind of footage you get from older camcorders. It showed the front of a house, just a static shot from across the street. The camera wasn't moving. I waited for something to happen. A car pulling in, someone walking out, anything. Nothing. It just sat there. After about a minute, the angle changed. Not a clean cut, more like the camera had been turned off and on again. Same house, different time of day. The lighting had shifted slightly. Still no people. I let it play for a few more minutes. Same pattern. Short clips, all of the same house from slightly different positions. Sometimes closer, sometimes further back. At first, I thought it might be someone testing a camera or recording footage for some reason I didn't understand. Then something small caught my attention. A car parked in the driveway. It looked familiar. I paused the tape and leaned closer to the screen. Same make, same color, same dent on the rear bumper. It was my car. I sat there for a second, not really moving. Then I rewound the tape and watched that section again. There was no mistake. It was my driveway. My house. I told myself it didn't make sense. The house in the footage looked the same, but it could have been from before I moved in. Maybe the previous owner had the same car. Maybe it was just similar. I kept watching. The clips continued. Different days, different lighting. At one point, the front porch light was on. At another, there were trash bins at the curb. Details that lined up with how things currently were. Then there was a clip that lasted longer than the others. The camera was positioned lower, closer to the ground, partially blocked by what looked like a parked car. The angle was slightly off-center, but I could see the front door clearly. After about 30 seconds, the door opened. I walked out. I didn't remember that moment specifically. It was just me stepping outside, looking down at my phone for a second, then walking toward the car. The recording ended abruptly after that. I ejected the tape and just sat there holding it. The next day, I drove back to the house where I bought the TV. There was no yard sale, no tables, no items, nothing. The driveway was empty. I walked up to the front door and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder. Still nothing. I stepped back and looked around. The windows were covered from the inside, not with curtains, but with something thicker, maybe cardboard. It didn't look like anyone had just moved out. It looked like the place hadn't been opened in a while. I stood there for a minute, then left. That night, around 9:30, there was a knock at my door. Not loud, just 2 quick knocks. I didn't go right away. I checked through the peephole first. It was the same man from the yard sale. He was standing there, hands in his jacket pockets, looking straight ahead. I opened the door halfway. "Hey," he said. "Yeah? You got the TV from me." It wasn't a question. "Yeah," I said. He nodded slowly. "You watch anything on it?" "Just tested it." He looked past me, into the house, like he was trying to see around me. "I need that back," he said. "I already paid for it," I said. "If there's an issue, I'll give you double," he cut in. I shook my head. "I'm not really looking to sell it." He didn't respond right away, just kept looking at me, then at the space behind me again. "You shouldn't keep things that aren't yours," he said. That didn't make sense. "I bought it from you," I said. He held my gaze for a few seconds longer, then nodded once. "All right," he said. Then he turned and walked away. I locked the door and checked the windows. I didn't watch the tape again that night. I didn't sleep much either. Around 2 in the morning, I heard something outside. Not loud, just the sound of something shifting, like gravel being disturbed. I got up and went to the front window, staying off to the side so I wasn't visible. There was a car parked across the street, engine off, no lights. I couldn't see inside. I stood there for a minute, then stepped back and turned off the lights in the living room. I didn't go outside. The next morning, the car was gone. I took the TV, the tape, and drove straight to the police station. I explained everything as clearly as I could. The sale, the tape, the footage. The officer watched part of it in a back room. He didn't say much, just nodded a few times, then took the tape and the TV. "We'll look into it," he said. I asked if I should be worried. He didn't answer that directly. "Call us if anything else happens," he said. Nothing else has happened since then. No one's come back to the house. No cars sitting outside. Everything's been normal. I still go out on weekends sometimes, drive past yard sales out of habit. I don't stop anymore, not after that. And I don't bring anything home unless I know exactly where it came from. My wife was 7 months pregnant with our first kid. We'd been trying to keep costs down where we could, especially with furniture, since most of it gets used for a short time anyway. That's how we ended up going to yard sales almost every weekend for a while. Clothes, small stuff, things we could clean and reuse. It felt practical. The crib was something we hadn't bought yet. We kept putting it off because everything new was more expensive than we expected. One Saturday morning, we saw a sign for a yard sale about 10 minutes from our place, in a neighborhood just outside ours. It was quieter, older houses, longer driveways. When we pulled up, there weren't many people there. A few tables, mostly household stuff. It looked like they were clearing things out quickly, not really organizing anything. The crib was off to the side, already taken apart and stacked in a neat pile. White wood, standard design, a few small scuffs, but nothing serious. My wife walked over to it first and crouched down, checking the rails. "Looks fine," she said. I picked up one of the side panels. It felt solid, no cracks. "How much for the crib?" I asked. A woman sitting in a folding chair near the garage looked up. She looked tired, not in a normal way, more like she hadn't been sleeping. "50, she said. That was low compared to what we'd been seeing. "Was it used recently?" my wife asked. The woman hesitated for a second. "It's still good," she said. "We just don't need it anymore." She didn't elaborate. I looked at my wife. She gave me a small nod. "All right," I said. "We'll take it." When I started loading the pieces into the back of my SUV, the woman stood up and walked over. "You want help putting it together?" she asked. "I think I've got it," I said. "It's just a crib." She kept standing there. "It's easier if I show you," she said. "Some parts are not obvious." That felt a little unnecessary, but I didn't see a reason to refuse. "Sure," I said, "if you don't mind." She nodded and grabbed her keys. "I'll follow you," she said. She arrived about 5 minutes after we did. I already had most of the pieces inside, leaned up against the wall in what was going to be the baby's room. She walked in without really looking around much at first, just focused on the crib parts. "Where do you want it?" she asked. I pointed to the corner near the window. She started assembling it quickly, like she'd done it a lot of times before, faster than I expected. At one point, she stopped and adjusted one of the side rails. "That one sticks a little," she said. "I can sand it down later," I told her. She shook her head. "No, it's not that," she said. "Just make sure it's tight." She tightened the screws herself more than necessary. While she was working, I noticed she wasn't just focused on the crib. Every so often, she'd glance toward the hallway, then toward the living room, like she was taking note of where things were. It wasn't obvious, just small looks. When she finished, she stepped back and looked at it. "Don't take it apart again," she said. I smiled a little. Wasn't planning to. She didn't smile back. "If anything feels loose, don't mess with it," she added. That was the second time someone had said something like that to me about something I bought at a yard sale. "Okay," I said. She nodded once, then left. That night, my wife went to stay with her sister. It was something we'd already planned. I stayed behind to finish setting up the room. Around 10:30, I was tightening a few screws on the crib, just making sure everything was solid. One of the lower rails felt slightly uneven. Not loose, just not perfectly aligned. I remembered what the woman said about not taking it apart, so I left it alone. I finished up, turned off the lights, and went to bed. The next morning, I went into the room to move a few boxes. The crib looked fine at first. Then I noticed one of the vertical slats on the side panel. It was slightly out of place. Not broken, just shifted, like it had been pushed from the inside. I stood there for a second, trying to remember if I'd done that while assembling it. I didn't think I had. I pushed it back into place and didn't think too much about it. That afternoon, there was a knock at the door. A man I didn't recognize was standing there, mid-40s, average build, wearing a plain hoodie. "Yeah?" I said, keeping the door mostly closed. "You bought a crib yesterday," he said. Not a question. "Yeah," I said. He nodded slowly. "That wasn't supposed to be sold," he said. I didn't respond right away. "You should give it back," he added. "I bought it from the owner," I said. "If there's an issue, I'm telling you," he cut in, not raising his voice, "it wasn't supposed to leave." There was a pause. "I can pay you for it," he said. I shook my head. "No, I think we're good." He stared at me for a few seconds, then his eyes shifted slightly, like he was trying to see past me into the house. "Where is it?" he asked. "In the house," I said. He nodded again. "All right," he said. Then he turned and walked away. I locked the door and checked the windows. Something about the way he asked where it was didn't sit right. That night, I heard a noise from the baby's room, A soft tapping. Not loud, just irregular. I stood in the hallway for a few seconds, listening. It stopped. I opened the door and turned on the light. The room looked the same. The crib was in place. Nothing seemed out of order. I walked over and checked the rails. Everything felt solid. I told myself it was just the house settling. The next morning, I noticed something different. One of the screws on the lower frame was partially backed out. Not loose enough to fall, but not tight either. I knew I had tightened everything the night before. I got a screwdriver and tightened it again. This time, I checked every single connection point. All secure. That afternoon, I saw a car parked across the street. Dark-colored sedan. Engine off. Someone sitting inside. I couldn't see their face clearly. I watched for a minute, then stepped back. When I looked again a few minutes later, the car was gone. That night, I decided to take a closer look at the part that had been uneven. I crouched down and ran my hand along the lower rail. There was a seam I hadn't noticed before. Not part of the original design, slightly off. I pressed on it. Nothing happened. I got a screwdriver and carefully pried at the edge. It took a bit of force, but eventually, a thin panel came loose. Inside, there was a small cavity carved into the wood. Wrapped in cloth, there were several memory cards. I stared at them for a few seconds before taking one out. I didn't want to, but I checked one on my computer. The files were short video clips. Different rooms, different houses. Most of them looked like bedrooms. Some were clearly filmed from inside closets or from low angles near the floor. I stopped after the third clip. There was a noise outside. I went to the front window and looked through the side of the curtain. The same sedan was parked across the street again. This time, I could see someone in the driver's seat, not moving, just sitting there. I took the memory cards, put them back in the cloth, and drove straight to the police station. I explained everything. The sale, the woman, the man who came to the door, what I found inside the crib. They took the cards, asked a few questions, told me not to go back to that house. When I got home, the front door was slightly open. Not wide, just enough that I knew I hadn't left it like that. I didn't go inside right away. I called the police again and waited outside. They cleared the house, nothing taken, but the baby's room had been disturbed. The crib was pulled slightly away from the wall. The lower panel was open again, empty. We didn't keep the crib. We didn't keep anything from that sale. My wife stayed with her sister for a while after that. I replaced the locks, put cameras outside, and stopped going to yard sales completely. I still think about how easily that could have gone differently. If we hadn't checked it, if we'd just used it without noticing anything, or if I hadn't been home that night. I don't know who that man was, or how long they had been using that crib before it ended up for sale. All I know is they came back for it, and they knew exactly where to go. I work in construction management, so I'm usually out of the house most of the day. Weekends are when I take care of things at home, small upgrades, cleaning out the garage, that kind of stuff. A couple months ago, I decided I wanted a second fridge for the garage. Nothing fancy, just something to keep drinks, extra food, things that don't fit inside the kitchen fridge. New ones were more expensive than I wanted to spend, so I started checking local yard sales. That Saturday, there were a few signs up in a neighborhood about 15 minutes away. It was a quiet area, older homes, wide driveways. The fridge was easy to spot. It was sitting near the garage, plugged into an extension cord. White, a little worn, but running. I opened it and felt the cold air right away. A man came out of the garage when he saw me looking at it. "Still works," he said. He was probably in his 50s. Solid build, short hair, didn't say much more than he had to. "How much?" I asked. $80. That was already a good deal. "Any issues?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, just don't need it anymore." I nodded. "I'll take it." He didn't respond right away, just looked at the fridge for a second, then back at me. "You got a truck?" he asked. "SUV," I said. "I can fit it." He shook his head slightly. "Better if I bring it. I've got a dolly." "I've moved appliances before," I said. "I know how to carry this one," he said. The way he said it made it sound less like an offer. I hesitated for a second, then said, "All right." He unplugged the fridge, strapped it to a dolly, and loaded it into the back of his pickup. "Where to?" he asked. I gave him my address. He showed up about 20 minutes later. I had already cleared space in the garage near the wall by the side door. He backed the truck into the driveway and got out without saying much. Just started unloading the fridge. "I'll help," I said. "I got it," he replied. He wheeled it into the garage, slower than necessary, like he was taking his time. When he got inside, he stopped for a second and looked around. Not obviously, just small movements. His eyes went to the side door, then to the shelves along the wall, then toward the door that leads into the house. "Right here?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, pointing to the spot. He positioned the fridge, then stepped back. "Got an outlet?" he asked. I pointed to the one near the floor. He plugged it in himself. It kicked on after a second. He didn't leave right away. Instead, he opened the fridge, looked inside, then closed it again. "You keep this door locked?" he asked, nodding toward the side door of the garage. "Yeah," I said. He nodded. "Good," he said. There was a pause. "Appreciate it," I said. He looked at me for a second longer, then walked out. For the first few days, everything was normal. I stocked it with drinks, some frozen stuff, nothing important. I was in and out of the garage a lot that week, organizing things. One evening, I noticed the fridge door wasn't fully closed, just slightly open. I figured I had left it like that. I shut it and moved on. A couple days later, I went out to grab a drink and noticed something else. The fridge was slightly pulled away from the wall. Not by much, maybe an inch. I didn't remember moving it. I pushed it back into place. It didn't feel loose or unstable. That night, around 11, I heard a noise from the garage. A dull sound, like something shifting. I paused, listening. It didn't happen again. I didn't go check right away. I told myself it was probably the compressor kicking on or something settling. The next morning, I found the fridge door open again, wider this time. I knew I hadn't left it like that. I checked inside. Everything was still there, nothing missing. I closed it slowly and stood there for a second, thinking about it. Later that afternoon, I noticed a car parked down the street. Dark sedan, engine off, someone inside. I didn't think much of it at first. Could have been anyone, but when I went back out an hour later, it was still there. Same spot. I couldn't see the driver clearly. I went back inside. That evening, I decided to take a closer look at the fridge. Not the inside, the back. I pulled it away from the wall a bit more. As soon as I did, I saw it. Something taped to the rear panel near the lower coils. A flat package wrapped in plastic and secured tightly. It wasn't part of the appliance. I stood there for a few seconds just looking at it. Then I peeled it off. It was heavier than it looked. Inside the plastic, there was a smaller sealed bag. White powder. I didn't need to test it to know what it probably was. I didn't put it back. I didn't touch anything else. I left the fridge where it was and went inside. I sat at the kitchen table for a while, trying to think through what to do. Then I grabbed my keys and the package and drove to the police station. I explained everything, where I bought it, who sold it, how he delivered it. They didn't seem surprised. They took the package, asked a few questions, and told me they'd look into it. "Did he see where you live?" one of the officers asked. "He delivered it," I said. He nodded. "All right. If anything happens, call us right away." When I got home, the garage door was closed like I left it. Everything looked normal. I went inside, locked the doors, and didn't go back into the garage that night. Around 1 a.m., I woke up to a noise. This time, it was clearer. Metal shifting. I got out of bed and moved quietly toward the hallway. The door leading into the garage was closed. I stood there, listening. Another sound, closer this time, like something being pulled. I stepped back and grabbed my phone, dialed 911, kept my voice low. "There's someone in my garage," I said. While I was on the call, I heard the side door open, then close. Footsteps, moving quickly, then silence. The police showed up a few minutes later. They cleared the garage, no one inside. The fridge had been pulled out from the wall, farther than before. The back panel was exposed. The tape was gone. Nothing else was taken. Not the tools, not anything valuable. Just that. I told them I had already turned it in earlier. They nodded, wrote it down, and said they'd add it to the report. I got rid of the fridge the next day. Didn't try to sell it, just had it hauled away. I replaced the lock on the side door and added a camera facing the driveway. For a while, I checked it every time I heard something outside, every time a car slowed down near the house. I still have the garage, still use it, but I don't leave anything out there that matters. And I don't bring anything home from yard sales anymore. Not if it came from someone I don't know, especially not something they insist on delivering themselves. I live alone in a small single-story house. I work in accounting, mostly from home now, so I spend a lot of time inside. Over the past year, I've been slowly fixing things up. Nothing major, just small improvements to make the place feel more finished. One of the things I wanted was a narrow mirror for the entryway. Something simple, just so I could check things before heading out. I wasn't in a rush to buy one, so I figured I'd just keep an eye out at yard sales. That's how I found it. It was leaning against the side of a house near the garage. Tall, rectangular with a dark wooden frame. Not decorative, just solid. The kind of thing you'd expect to see in a hallway. I walked over and looked at the glass. A little worn, but clear. A man stepped out from the garage as I was checking the frame. 30, he said before I even asked. I looked at him. Mid-50s, maybe. Short hair, clean clothes, but something about the way he was standing felt off. Too still. Does it hang or just lean? I asked. Either, he said. I nodded. I'll take it. He didn't respond right away, just watched me for a second, then stepped closer. You live close? He asked. Yeah, I said. Not far. He nodded slowly. That's a good spot for it, he said, near a door. I figured he meant visually. Yeah, that's the plan, I said. I picked it up. It was heavier than I expected, but manageable. I can help you load it, he said. I've got it, I told him. He didn't argue, just followed behind me as I carried it to my car. While I opened the back, he stood a few feet away, watching. Careful with the back, he said. I paused. What about it? Just don't mess with it too much, he said. I didn't ask anything else. I paid him, got in my car, and left. When I got home, I brought it inside and leaned it against the wall near the front door. It fit perfectly. I stepped back and looked at it. It actually made the space feel more finished, like I had planned it that way. I left it there and went about the rest of my day. That night around 9, I locked up like I always do. Front door, back door, side windows. Routine. Before heading to bed, I passed by the mirror again. For a second, I thought it looked slightly angled. Not much, just not perfectly flush with the wall. I adjusted it with my foot and went to bed. The next morning, I noticed it again. The angle, slightly different from where I left it. I stood there for a second, thinking about it. It was leaning on hardwood. Maybe it shifted a little overnight. I pushed it back into place and didn't think much more about it. 2 days later, I came home from the grocery store and saw a car parked across the street. Dark sedan, engine off, someone inside. I only noticed it because it was directly across from my house. I carried my bags inside, put things away, and when I looked out again, it was still there. I couldn't see the driver clearly. I went back to what I was doing. That evening, there was a knock at the door. 2 quick knocks. I checked through the peephole. It was the same man from the yard sale. I opened the door halfway. Hey, he said. Yeah? That mirror, you still got it? Yeah, I said. He nodded. I think I made a mistake selling it, he said. I'll give you your money back. I shook my head. I'm using it. I can give you more, he said. I'm good, I replied. He looked past me just slightly like he was trying to see into the house. Where'd you put it? He asked. Inside, I said. He nodded again. All right, he said. He didn't push it, just turned and walked away. I locked the door and stood there for a second. Something about that felt off, but I couldn't point to anything specific. That night, I made sure everything was locked again. Before going to bed, I checked the mirror. Still in place. Sometime after midnight, I woke up. No loud noise, just that feeling that something had changed. I stayed still for a few seconds, listening. Nothing. I got out of bed and walked into the hallway. The house was quiet. I stopped near the entryway. The mirror was angled again, more than before, like it had been pulled slightly away from the wall. I didn't remember doing that. I stepped closer and looked at the floor. There were faint marks where the bottom edge had shifted. I adjusted it again, this time pressing it firmly back. Then I went back to bed. The next afternoon, the car was back. Same spot, same angle. This time I stood by the window a little longer. The person inside didn't move. After a few minutes, the car started and drove off. That evening, I decided to move the mirror properly, not just lean it, I wanted to mount it so it wouldn't shift anymore. I tilted it forward to check the back. That's when I noticed it. The backing panel didn't look original. The wood tone was slightly different from the frame. The screws were newer. I ran my hand along the edge. There was a slight gap. I got a screwdriver. I told myself I was just checking how it was built. The panel came off easier than it should have. Behind it, there was a shallow compartment carved into the frame. Inside, there was a plastic folder. I pulled it out and opened it. Photos, printed, not random. Interior shots of different houses, living rooms, hallways, entryways, some taken from outside through windows, others from inside. I flipped through a few more. Some had small notes written on the back, short phrases, times, details about doors. Then I saw one that made me stop. It was my house, the entryway, the same spot where the mirror now stood, taken from outside through the front window. I didn't put the panel back on. I left everything where it was and stepped away. A few minutes later, I heard something outside, a car door closing. I moved to the side of the window and looked out carefully. The same sedan was parked in front of my house now. The man from the yard sale was sitting in the driver's seat, looking directly at the front of the house. I didn't go outside. I grabbed my phone and called the police. Kept my voice low, explained what I found. While I was on the call, he got out of the car, walked up the driveway, stopped near the front door, didn't knock, just stood there for a few seconds. Then he stepped back and looked toward the window. I moved further out of sight. He walked back to the car and drove off. The police came about 10 minutes later. I showed them the mirror, the compartment, the photos. They took everything, asked me where I bought it, asked if he had been inside the house. I told them no. They didn't say much beyond that, just told me to call if I saw him again. I didn't keep the mirror. I didn't want it in the house. I still notice cars more than I used to, especially ones that stay parked too long or come back more than once. And I don't put anything near the front window anymore. Not where someone outside can stand still long enough to get a clear view. I live alone in a small house on the edge of town. It gets colder out here than it does closer to the city, especially at night. The insulation isn't great either, so in the winter I usually rely on a couple of space heaters to keep things comfortable. Last year, one of them stopped working right when the temperature started dropping. I could have bought a new one, but I figured I'd check a few yard sales first. It's the kind of thing people get rid of when they upgrade. That Saturday morning, I saw a sign posted near a gas station. Just cardboard with moving sale written in black marker and an arrow pointing down a side road. The house was a little isolated. Long driveway, no neighbors close by. There were a few items laid out on folding tables, but not much organization. It looked like they were trying to clear things out quickly. The heater was sitting on the ground near the garage. Old metal casing, the kind with a handle on top and vents along the sides, heavier than the plastic ones you see now. I crouched down and looked at it. A little rust on the edges, but intact. "Works fine," a man said from behind me. I turned. Late 40s, maybe early 50s. Average build. He had that look of someone who hadn't slept much. "You used it recently?" I asked. "Last winter," he said. "Still runs." "How much?" $25. That was cheap. "All right," I said. "I'll take it." He didn't respond right away, just watched me for a second. "You got something to plug it into?" I asked. "There's an outlet on the side of the house," he said. "Let's test it." We carried it over together and plugged it in. It took a second, then the internal fan kicked on with a low hum. Warm air started coming out. "See," he said. I nodded. As I unplugged it, he said, "You live far from here?" "Not really," I said. 10 minutes. He leaned slightly against the wall, like he was just making conversation. "You out by the highway or further in?" he asked. "Closer to the edge," I said. He nodded, like that meant something to him. "Good," he said. I didn't ask what he meant. When I carried the heater back to my car, he followed a few steps behind me. "Careful with the casing," he said. "It heats uneven if it gets dented." "I'll keep that in mind," I said. I put it in the trunk. He didn't move right away. "If it makes any noise, don't open it up," he added. I looked at him. "Why would I open it?" He shrugged. "People do that." I nodded and got in the car. At home, I set it up in the living room near the wall outlet. It worked fine. The fan was a little louder than I expected, but nothing unusual for something that old. That night, I left it running for a few hours while I watched TV. At some point, I noticed a faint clicking sound under the hum of the fan. Not constant, just occasional. I assumed it was the metal expanding with heat. The next day, I left the house for a few hours. When I got back, the heater was off. I was pretty sure I had turned it on before leaving, but I couldn't remember clearly. I plugged it back in and turned it on again. Same hum, same occasional clicking. That evening, I was sitting on the couch when I heard something different. A light shift. Not from the fan, from inside the unit. I muted the TV and listened. Nothing. Then, after a few seconds, a faint movement again, like something settling inside the casing. I stood up and walked over to it. The air coming out was still warm. Everything seemed normal. I turned it off and unplugged it. The next afternoon, I noticed a car parked down the road. Dark-colored sedan, engine off. It wasn't directly in front of my house, but close enough that I could see it from the window. I didn't think much of it at first, but when I checked again an hour later, it was still there. I couldn't see who was inside. I went back to what I was doing. That night, I decided to take a closer look at the heater. Not to take it apart, just to check the exterior. I turned it over slightly to look at the underside. That's when I noticed something. One of the screws on the bottom panel didn't match the others. It was newer, different color. I ran my finger along the edge of the panel. There was a slight gap. I left it alone for a while, then I went and got a screwdriver. I told myself I was just checking if it had been repaired before. The screw came out easily. Then another. The panel loosened. I pulled it back slightly. Inside, tucked between the internal components, was a small insulated pouch, wrapped tightly, not part of the heater. I stared at it for a few seconds before pulling it out. It was heavier than it looked. Inside the pouch, there were several small items. Jewelry, loose stones, a few rings, nothing labeled. I didn't put it back. I didn't touch anything else inside. I set the pouch on the table and stepped away. A few minutes later, I heard a car door outside. I went to the window and looked out from the side. The same sedan was parked closer now, near the front of my house. Someone was in the driver's seat. I couldn't see their face clearly. I stepped back and grabbed my phone. I hadn't decided what to do yet, but I knew I didn't want to leave things as they were. Before I could dial, there was a knock at the door. 2 quick knocks. I didn't open it. I checked through the peephole. It was the same man from the yard sale. "Hey," he said through the door, "I need to talk to you." I didn't respond. "I think you got something that shouldn't have been in there," he said. That confirmed it. I stayed quiet. "I can fix it," he added. "Just open the door." I stepped back from the door. After a few seconds, I heard him shift his weight. Then nothing. I waited. A minute passed. Then I heard footsteps moving away. I went back to the window. He was getting into the sedan. The car pulled away slowly. I didn't wait after that. I took the pouch, got in my car, and drove straight to the police station. I explained everything. Where I bought the heater, what I found inside, that he had come to my house. They took the pouch, asked a few questions. "Did you give him your address?" one of them asked. I shook my head. "He asked where I lived," I said. "I kept it general." They wrote that down. When I got home, everything looked the same. The heater was still where I left it, unplugged. That night, I didn't turn it on. I didn't even plug it back in. Around midnight, I heard something outside. A soft sound, like someone stepping on gravel. I stayed in the bedroom, didn't go check. In the morning, I found marks near the side of the house. Footprints, close to the window. I got rid of the heater that same day. Didn't try to sell it. Didn't keep any part of it. I bought a new one from a store after that. I still see cars parked near the road sometimes. People stopping for a few minutes before moving on. It probably doesn't mean anything, but I don't ignore it anymore. And I don't bring anything like that into the house unless I know exactly where it came from. If you made it this far, you probably realized something. It's not really about what you bring home, it's about who might come back for it. So if that got to you, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, and drop in the comments which story got to you the most. And if you think being stuck inside during a blizzard is safer than dealing with people like that, you're going to want to rethink that. Click now to watch 4 disturbing blizzard horror stories. because out there, it's not just the cold you have to worry about. Thanks for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.